Astroscientists agree on one point, that the possibility of life elsewhere is not only quite probable, some feel it is there without a doubt. Let us suppose then that these objects are real space vehicles, extraterrestrial in origin, and not an illusion of the mind.
There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide at all.
Nothing to hide at all. We'll see about that. Welcome to Somewhere in the Live Stream. I am your host, Ryan Sprague. We will be joined in just a few moments by our incredible moderator and co-host, Suzanne. And we have two very special guests for you guys today. They were at the National Press Club UAP event in Washington, D.C. We'll be joined in just a few minutes by Anthony Miller and Sinéad Whelehan. I am so excited from the Fire in the Cosmos podcast and YouTube channel. I see some of their fans and listeners in the chat. So welcome to our live stream. I can't wait for our audience to mix and meld with all the wonderful people over at Fire in the Cosmos as well, guys. So welcome to what will be a breakdown of the National UAP Press Club event. It is 7:07 a.m. on Monday here in the future in Japan. So I do apologize if I'm a little off tonight, guys, but I know my guests are going to run this show tonight. I'm so excited. They were there. Anthony and Sinead were there for this historic event. So we're going to get the inside scoop about what happened before the event, what happened during, what happened after. They conducted a bunch of really cool interviews, which I will tell you guys to go over to Twitter, follow Fire in the Cosmos, go to their Patreon page, go to their YouTube channel. We will have links in the show notes for all of that in retrospect as well. But yeah, this is going to be super, super fun. But before we get to our guests, I want to say hello to all of our regulars in the chat. Welcome. It's so good to have you guys here. Thanks for joining us an hour later than usual. We do have quiet hours here in my apartment in Osaka. So I wanted to make sure I pushed it just a little further, just in case. So I might be a little bit more quiet than usual as well. But yeah, things are going incredible over here. I'm exploring like crazy, learning the lingo, trying to at least, and failing miserably. But that's what it's about. It's about stumbling, learning. But yeah, things are going great over here. Things are going incredible in the UFO world, and I'm so happy to have you guys with us tonight. Super chat and super stickers are open, so if you would like to help support the show, that is an easy way to do that tonight. We will highlight your comments and questions for our guests and for all of us tonight as well. Those will remain open all night. We have PayPal, we have Buy Me a Coffee, QR codes on the screen, links in the show notes for that as well. All of your donations go back to making the show bigger and better, and we certainly appreciate everything you guys are willing to do. You know what time it is. It is time for your code word for tonight. I don't have the images up for you here tonight, but our code word for today, guys, is Varginha. That is VARGIN. Varginha. Yes, VARGINHA. There we go. Wow, it took me a second there. That's your code word. So go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review and put Varginha somewhere in your review, and we'll be sure to read that on the show in the future. If you're over on Spotify watching or listening to the show, put the word Varginha in the comments of this episode. I cannot talk. So let's get people who can actually talk. How's that sound? Once again, Varginha, code word. Got it? Cool. All right. Let's break down the National Press Club UAP event. I'm going to bring them all in. We're going to get to know them very well. Boom. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Somewhere in the Live Stream.
Hi,
everyone. Hey, Ryan. Hey, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for having us. It's wonderful to be here. We very much believe in community and collaboration. So we very much appreciate the invitation. Yeah,
Of
it's great to be
course,
here.
Sinead. Well, let's talk about that for just a minute before we get to know you guys a little bit better. Now, I put out a call, gosh, maybe a couple days before the National Press Club event. As I do, I'm a very last minute person, and I'm like, hey, is anyone going to this thing? I would love to have some like correspondence on the ground, kind of reporting on what was going on there. And Anthony, you were so kind and so quick to like get back to me and be like, "Hey man, I'm gonna be there. Like, what are you looking for?" And I had no idea. I had no idea what I was looking for. But I just wanted to kind of get that inside look. I haven't been able to actually go to something like this yet. Because I'm either overseas or I'm traveling or I'm working and I haven't been able to make it happen. So it's
Mm.
so cool when people can actually go to these things and put the work and effort in to do that. And that's what you both did. So thank you. Thank you for reaching out. And I feel like I've made two incredible friends today
Aw.
as well. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
thanks,
for
Ryan. Yeah,
that.
no, I totally appreciate it, man. Like yeah, I tend to be all over X, unfortunately, just to stay in tune with what's going on in this community, which is something we all have to do, sadly. Um, so yeah, I mean, thankfully I saw your message for once. We can thank the algorithm that popped
Yeah,
it up in my feed.
right.
And it happened to be like right when I was preparing to get things together to go there. Sinead was visiting me from Toronto, and I happen to live in the DC area, so I mean, it worked out perfectly. So thank you for giving us the chance.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hey, there we go. Now I know where you guys both kind of originate from. That was going to be one of my first questions. So, before we kind of get into the National Press Club event itself, uh, tell us how you two met. How did Fire in the Cosmos come to be? And yeah, tell us a little of the origin story, if you don't mind. Whoever wants to take that.
Oh,
Sinead, I'll let you kick it off.
yeah, I'll start, and you can round it up. So basically, I was attending Contact in the Desert, as was Anthony, and I had had a previous experience of trying to do a spiritual podcast with someone that I didn't know very well, and she was a lovely person, but it just didn't really work. Sometimes we try these things and nothing bad happens. It's just not really gelling, right? So eventually we
Mhm.
parted ways, and I felt like, well, I'm really much more of a behind the camera person actually than an in front of the camera person. I never intended to be online, on screen, on YouTube, anything. Like I had never had any intention of doing that. It just seems to keep happening. So after that YouTube attempt happened, I felt like, sorry, after that podcast attempt happened, I felt like, okay, well then there that is. I tried a podcast, done, didn't work out. Okay, did that, check. But and completely went out of my mind. And meanwhile, I went to Contact in the Desert. I have a very good friend, Hakeem Isler, who's the creator of Psy Games, who he's one of my closest friends in the field. And we just wanted to see each other and say hi. We were both arriving there for Contact in the Desert. So we were texting each other, hey, where are you right now? Where are you right now? And he was about to pull up. So I was walking up to the front door, met him at the front door of the hotel, and I didn't know that he and Anthony, who I didn't know at the time, were texting each other as well. And so Anthony just happened to wander over and intersect with the two of us at the door. So I met Anthony there. Hakeem was busy. He had to go off and do something. He had quite a lot going on at Contact. I think he was starting to, he was starting to do a lot of press for Psy Games. And so anyway, so Anthony and I ended up walking away, and we ended up spending, I don't know, 5 hours talking. We just went straight into a conversation. We felt like we knew each other right away. There was a feeling of familiarity, of comfort, of recognition. And then
I had actually recognized her. Like I had seen her do some interviews about her experiences on some shows, and I also take Darren King, Exo Academia, I take his online courses on consciousness, and I think Sinead had like a cameo in one of them, like early on when they started. So I recognized her like right away, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Like I heard your stories, and she's like, "What?"
yeah.
Your reputation precedes you. I love it.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I mean, it still surprises me when people are like, "Oh, I've seen your video or something." It's sort of weird. It's still sort of an abstract experience to me. But anyway, so he came up and said that, and we just started chatting. And then I was at the Tommy Bahama Resort, which is across the road from the Esmeralda, which is where the event is held. So he just ended up walking me over. This is later on that night after we talked already for several hours and said hello to a lot of our friends. And again, we sat, in the courtyard of my hotel, and we just talked and talked and talked. And we obviously had a connection, and we had a great deal in common. We were sharing a lot of perspectives on just what we think is going on a very big scale on Earth, and in the world in general, but then also on a smaller scale for the UFO community. And individually, we also had similar perspectives on how we wanted to move through our own spiritual path and our own evolution, which we think is important to work on, right? It's not just all about what's happening externally. You have to do the work inside as well. So I was like, oh, this guy's awesome. And I didn't know, neither one of us knew that at the time we were both thinking, oh, I wish I could do a podcast with this person. But Anthony already had a podcast co-host. So Anthony, do you want to take it from there?
Sure. Thanks, Sinead. Yeah, so I already had a co-host. Coincidentally, had gone through some of the same issues that Sinead mentioned. She went through with her former co-host. I did not feel like we were in alignment on views about this field and kind of like a genuine, authentic approach towards working in this community and caring about it. But we talked about some of those things, but we were just kind of rolling ahead with the podcast. Like we were comfortable enough to do it, but that those things were in the background. So the whole time Sinead's talking, I'm like, oh man, I'm so pissed. I have a co-host already. Like, what am I going to do? This one would be perfect. Like she felt so balanced and like in resonance with everything that I held close and dear to me in this community and my vision for what I want to do. So we were talking this whole time and I'm thinking that, and then eventually we called it. It was like probably like 2 a.m. or so. And the conference was about to start the next morning. So, and I was volunteering there. So I had an early gig. So I just went back to my Airbnb, went to bed, and I woke up that morning, like I'm talking like 6 hours later. And I had a text from my co-host resigning from my podcast. Like she was not at the conference, did not know what was going on. We had not had any like fights or anything like that. Just out of nowhere, like within 6 hours after this like energetic connection that was made between me and Sinead. And both of us having that strong intentionality. So I don't know what was going on there, but it was definitely not normal. And the timing of everything was very interesting. And it goes back to like the things that happened that I was not even aware of, between like a negative experience that I had that led me to crash on my co-host's couch for 4 days. And then that somehow like got her to see some things and got her brain working. And that's eventually what ended up leading her to send that text the morning of contact resigning. So it's a much longer story, but like all of it really got me to see that even experiences or anything in life that we may think of as negative because of our kind of tunnel vision in like a very linear sense temporally, may not actually end up being negative for our lives later on, because we're not seeing how all those puzzle pieces connect and when they're going to fall into place. And that's what happened with me and Sinead. So
yeah, I mean, we had little things happen too, like synchronicities. And when he came up to me after he had gotten that unexpected text from his podcast co-host saying I'm resigning, he found me with this enormous coffee, because we'd been up late and he had to volunteer all day. So he had this coffee that was like the size of a small building, And he came up to me and just looked at me. And he's like, hey, Sinead. And I could tell there was something going on. He just, by the way, he said hi. And I'm like, hey, good morning. And he's like, good morning. He's like, so I have something to tell you. And we basically had a telepathic moment. I knew what he was going to say. And he had a sense that he knew I was going to say yes. He basically was going to ask me right then and there to do the podcast with him. And I just knew that's what was going to come out of his mouth. So then after that, we had synchronicities over the next several days. We had, I think 1 night later, 2 nights later, we had an incredibly intense, meaningful, resonant conversation with our mutual friend, David Hooper, who's doing some very interesting stuff around telepathy and UAP detection. So we bonded and we were talking until 5 o'clock in the morning. And at one point, Anthony and I both had this feeling that we should just look up at the sky and take a picture. So we did. And in the picture is an eye in the sky, which is something I've seen personally. I've seen it 2 other times in the sky before. But that told me also that was a validating experience for me, that it was there. It's in a photograph. I can share it with you guys at some point, but it was there right above us. And I felt that if it was there, and Anthony felt that something was there, and he took a picture. So there were just small things like that that made it feel extra resonant and kind of validating that we were going to do this work together. And ever since then, since May last year, so easy to work together. We see everything pretty much exactly the same way. Like even our aesthetics are the same. We've just finished designing our logo, which we're going to release shortly, our actual for real logo, because the one we have now is temporary. It's taking us forever to develop a new one. But even with things like that, it's like, what do you think about this? Yes. What do you think about that? Yes. Like we just have exactly the same. Yeah. It's really quite wonderful. So the flow is there, it's this feeling of flow and ease, and very much meant to be in terms of how we both want to contribute to the community, right? It's really important for us to be active. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Suzanne and I have, a similar story on many different levels. I mean,
sounds so familiar, doesn't it?
Right? I was just gonna say, maybe not telepathically, but we met in I live in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Suzanne happened to be traveling through the UK at the time, her and her husband, and we met up and we at her hotel, and we actually like had a super awesome conversation and because I've had the opportunity to meet people in the past who either listen to my shows or know my work, and sometimes it doesn't go the way you would hope. People are expecting certain things, or maybe they're not as stable as you had maybe hoped, or at a point in their life where they're really searching for something and they're expecting me, the person who they listen to give them all the answers, and that's not what I'm here to do. I don't know what any of this stuff is, the paranormal, parapsychology, UFOs, the supernatural. I'm trying to understand it, and it's conversations like this that I think will get us closer. But yeah, there's these expectations and whatnot. So when Suzanne and I decided to meet up, I'm like, you know what? No expectations whatsoever, and she blew me away with her knowledge, with her generosity, with her kindness, and it was the same thing. Like I kind of roped her into finally being on camera. She was just kind of doing some
Sinead, I was
research
just
for
where
me.
you are.
Yep. And now, like, she's an invaluable part of what we do here, and the chat
Lucky to be here.
loves her. The chat absolutely loves
And
her.
I'm crazy
So
about them. It's amazing how a community actually builds electronically.
it does.
And this Somewhere in the Skies community, and I'm sure yours is the same, is amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Awesome. Origin story done. I love it. Thank you guys. Well, I can't wait to see the new logo and everything. I know how hard that is. I've gone through like 50 logos at this point. So it's the small things. It really is. It really is. But awesome. Well, everyone, please go subscribe to Fire in the Cosmos. We'll be putting links up and all that throughout the show as well. But okay. So let's get to the meat of the conversation. Or I guess for our vegetarians, let's get to the salad. I don't know. Wow. Way too early for a dad joke here. Okay. The National Press Club event. You guys went to it. When did you decide you were both going to go to this? And what did you think of the Varhinia UFO case prior to going to this thing, and going into this event? Anthony, I guess let's start with you, man.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so having the luxury, one of the few, of living in the DC area these days, is being around the center of the focal point of all of these events, whether it's a hearing or this type of event. So, and I've been lucky enough, because of my position here in this area and getting into this field, realizing how much of a connection there is to these topics with people from all tastes and flavors in this area of the country. I'm a former open source intelligence government contractor myself, and I guess that unfortunately it gives you a sort of level of credibility among people in that community who either are current or former, whether it's military or intelligence or any government position. So having that, I think, helped me kind of start to have conversations with people who would feel comfortable opening up with me in ways, who are in those positions. And yeah, I mean, that's really what started growing my network. And I mean, within that, and this is something that Sinead and I have discussed in this community, like there's a very necessary and understandable caution and reticence around that community because of the dark history and present in terms of what they do to experiencers and just their approach to this topic as a whole. Uh, and the issue is when we say they, it's a big word, right?
Yeah.
But there are not that many people in that field who work on this topic. Very few compared to the massive size, like the bloated size of the government and intelligence and defense and military and all that. So, I mean, like I was working on media analysis on geopolitics. That was my job for 15 years, and I've been unemployed for a year out of that field. So, and I mean, there's millions of other people like me in those fields who had nothing to do with this topic. And those people, like as you cautiously get to know them, just to make sure their intentions are legit and pure, there's a lot who are just people like us, like actually, you know, may either regret their jobs, whether they were working on something unethical, unmoral, or immoral. I regretted several things in my job, just because, you know, I was passing along information on narratives in geopolitical media and trends and even publicly available social media monitoring overseas and what was going on in other countries' social media profiles or landscapes. And you don't know what's being done with that information until you see how it changes in policy, whether it's out of a certain department, the government, or a president or a party. So once you start seeing that, it kind of changes your perspective, and you feel kind of brushing up against that ethical line. So there's so many others like me in that community who may not necessarily agree with how their work is being utilized, and you know they may go through their own sort of awakenings and changes in their lives. Like they're not barred from that just because of their jobs. They still have a soul. They're still people like us. So with that said, like there is necessary caution with anyone in that field. So I get it, but I've managed to grow a community of close friends, some of whom worked in those fields, some of whom did not. Many of whom are just into consciousness exploration from various multidisciplinary backgrounds. And through that network, this is sorry, a long segue,
No.
but through those networks, I began finding out about consciousness organizations overseas, like the Galileo Commission, the Scientific and Medical Network, the Pari Center in Italy, like all of these things that I would have never even heard of if it weren't for some of the people I met in the DC area. And specifically a good friend of mine who's not in those communities, but he was into consciousness and UFOs, and I didn't even know that was a thing. So like the way that network grew is eventually how I get sometimes I'll get a heads up when there's an event like this taking place. That was a long
Okay.
intro, but I got a heads up, and I asked Sinead about it because she knew James and she hadn't heard about it yet, I don't think. Because James wasn't really publicizing this at the time, but he was kind of dropping hints on social media and in
Oh, yeah.
interviews, like going back through the fall. So you know, I did some of my own open source scouring of his social media posts and his interviews, and I was like, okay, this sounds kind of legit, because we weren't sure how legit it was when we first heard about it. And Sinead lives all the way up in Toronto, so we were trying to figure out if she should come down here or not. But we didn't get confirmation until probably like maybe the week before it was publicly announced by James.
Yeah.
And that's when Sinead booked her flight. Yeah.
Yeah. Even just
Which
a few
is-
days before.
Well, and I commend you guys too, especially you, Sinead, because like there's no guarantee when you go to these things that you're going to get in the room. I mean, the congressional UFO hearings, I've heard some stories of people flipping out because they were rejected and they had been waiting, since 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It's like they were going to like an Oasis concert, or something, and that they were
Yeah.
turned away. So like I really commend you for doing that. Knowing James can definitely help. So that's good too. But yeah, so okay, that's cool. And thank you for kind of painting that picture, Anthony, of your background, because I think it is important to remember that a lot of people in the military, in the government, in the intelligence apparatus, we look at them as this big, sort of thing, singular thing, but it's made up of many people with many different beliefs and motives and agendas, and they're just looking for answers like everyone else. So thank you for
Most of them.
clarifying that.
Most of
Yeah,
them.
most of them. Yes, exactly. Cool. So okay, so you guys get there and kind of paint that picture for us before the actual event starts. Like, what was the atmosphere like, the mood, the vibe, I guess? What were you guys experiencing before you even got in the room? If one of you want to take that, Sinead, I guess we'll go with you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, Anthony and I really are pretty hardcore about this, like about directly being involved in the community, meaning getting our bodies there, right, to events as much as possible. So Anthony has been to all of the previous congressional hearings. We were both at
Oh,
the
wow.
September, yeah. So he knows about freaking out about getting in or not, right, and being in line from 4 a.m.
Yeah.
So then we both went to the September 9th one. We got in, by the way, by the skin of our teeth. There was one person behind us who was the last person to get in. We were very lucky.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so then we attended Seoul. And when we attended the Seoul conference, when we attended the Seoul conference, we got to get to know Jeff Nusatelli a little better because we had met him previously. He's just the sweetest, loveliest guy. And so he was the first person that we saw when we arrived at the event at the National Press Club. He was there. He was helping out. He was not making a big deal out of himself at all. He was just helping people, get through. There's a place where you have to use a QR code and scan it to be able to, these gates open, and then you can get in, part of the security process. So he was one of the first people there that we saw, and he just said, "Hey guys, we were just there helping people get through the gate. Do you have your QR code?" We said hello. And he's just such a sweetheart. It was just a very nice energy right away to see Jeff. And then as we went into the room, the seating was for 400 people, and we really thought it was going to be completely packed. So we were prepared to get there very early in the morning to line up. But we ended up leaving later than we thought we were, and we were not sure, what it was going to be like when we got there. Will we get in or will we not? And there was no huge lineup. There was actually not even a full room. That would surprise me. I wish it had been a completely full room. But it ended up being about, I think, 250 people. I haven't actually checked the organizers yet to ask them, but it was about that. And so there was a nice, calm kind of energy to begin with. James was there, running around, of course, dealing with details. And there were last minute organizational things going on, like how were they going to position cameras? How was the sound? Making sure the translator was going to be seated in an appropriate position for the witnesses, and just saying hello to friends and, looking around at this room where so many incredible events have happened, like really historical area. And also as a Canadian, I've never been to anything like that. We really do not have much of anything going on in Canada right now with regard to ufology, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing what I do, because it's a topic of great importance to me, and I need to be involved. I need to be an activist in it. And there really is not a lot of opportunity to do that in Canada. So I always come to the US. But for me personally, I had wanted to go because I've known James for a few years. He's a lovely person. We've always had great conversations, and we stayed in touch by messaging. And so he messaged me about a year ago saying, "I can't believe it." Like, he was obviously in a state of being very thrilled and very stunned. This was just in text. "I just got the interview of my career," he said. "I can't believe it. I just got the interview of my career." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I got this incredible witness. I can't tell you who it is, but it's someone who is still working, this meaning Varginha, because that's where he was working on at the time. He was still investigating Varginha, and he was in Brazil. And so I knew he was in Brazil, and he just said, "I got a witness who is still working in an official capacity," meaning, and I thought that meant in the government, but it ended up being the Dr. Italo, who's at the hospital, who they had to work very hard to convince to come out and tell his story. So I just remember getting that message and wondering, what was this about? And bugging James every once in a while, just say, like, what did you mean? What's this incredible interview? And he would tell me just the tiniest thing, once in a while. But then eventually it all ended up coming out. And I know how hard he's worked on this project. And I know everyone does. I mean, if you're paying attention to his work, he's worked his butt off for, really, like, barely got any sleep for the last 9 months, has been flying back and forth to Brazil, trying to encourage the witnesses to come forth and to feel that they are with someone who's going to treat them respectfully, keep them safe and honor their story, because they're not being treated that way in Brazil. They're not being respected properly there. So it took a while for him to nurture those relationships, and then to have them eventually come to fruition like this. I really just wanted to be there to support him, to thank him for all of his work for the community, and to thank the witnesses for their courage, and also to witness, this moment. So I think I share that with a lot of people that were there. They really were there to witness this testimony. And once we all got seated and the proceedings started, there was definitely a sense of warmth that was coming from Karen Austin, who is, as Anthony has pointed out in our episode about the event, could not have been a better choice to MC. She's so fantastic. She's worked with John Mack, or she had worked with John Mack before he passed away, for a long time. She was one of his patients. She's an experiencer. She's also an academic. So she has that wonderful blend of being an experiencer, but also coming from the intellectual perspective. And so she kicked it off in the room, and it was a wonderful, warm, but official feeling,
Yeah.
She really,
I wasn't familiar with her prior, but I will say, like, my gosh, she was fantastic.
yeah.
I've moderated panels in the past. I used to do, like, Ancient Aliens. They would do their Alien Con things, and they would literally, like, fly me in, and I'd be going room to room to room for, like, 7 hours just hosting panels, and I had no information on who these people were, what we were gonna be talking about. They were just like, "Go in there and, like, make something happen." So, kudos to her for doing this, because she did such
we heard it was
Oh
pretty
my
last minute
gosh.
for her too.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, like, James, we have to give James credit. There were a lot of detours and roadblocks when it came to this event. We'll get to that in terms of the witnesses who were not able to make it to the US for this as well, and how they, compensated for that. And I think did a wonderful job in doing that. But again, I want to give her kudos, because that she did an incredible job of introducing this, kind of keeping the thing going, and bringing a immediate, urgent feel to a lot of it as well. So, yeah.
I would
For sure.
definitely check out, like, she did a really great interview about her life and what she's gone through with my friend Dr. Kimberly Engels on her show, Phenomenology of the Phenomenon. That's what it's called, through the Society for UAP Studies. I would highly recommend you or your audience check that out with Karen Austin, because, in addition to her work with John Mack, she's also managing the massive metadata research analysis project at the Archives of the Impossible at Rice University, which is like dealing with all the, like, I think hundreds of thousands of Whitley Strieber's letters that he and Anne received after his books came out in the 80s and 90s. And they got I think they got some other data as well. I'm blanking now who else. I know they're eventually going to get Jacques Vallée's archive as well once that opens up. And a few others. So their work, Karen's work, and that group's work is focused all on experiencers and experiencer accounts. So having that kind of energy there at this event, I think, was really important.
Nice.
She had given a talk, excuse me, at the Seoul conference last year, meaning 2024. So, sorry, 2 years ago. We're in 2026 now. And it was a talk that came from the experiencer perspective. And Seoul is known for being heavily academic, like really heady content. Karen brought in that heart. She brought in the direct experience of the phenomenon. She brought in also how careful, how important it is to think carefully about what we're experiencing, and to be able to look for language that we feel is going to encapsulate that experience, so we can translate as best as possible to other people in the audience. anyway, she covered, it was just the most wonderful talk. You can find it online. It's in Soul's archives on their channel on YouTube. So you can see her give this talk, but it was so moving that everyone in the audience stood up and, gave her a standing ovation. People were crying. Anthony was there. He witnessed it.
I was about to start crying. I was, yeah. Yeah, it was intense.
Really
it was this massive release that you felt was pent up by the so many experiencers who were there and have attended these kind of dry, very heady conferences. And
It
to
is
see,
so true.
to see and feel that, it was
Yeah.
impressive.
The first takeaway from my first Soul conference, which was their second Soul conference, Ryan asked me in the recap of the live stream following that, what was my biggest takeaway? And my biggest takeaway, oddly, despite all the knowledge and all the information, was what it felt like to sit in a room and no one was questioning whether the experience was true or false.
Mm.
Everyone in the room was on the same page for the most part. And what that does to lift and open the brain and allow some serious critical thought and emotional work, I think is stunning. Every day, it's easy not to pay attention to the cynicism that we all deal with every day, every format, every outlet. And when you don't have to, it's really something.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, Suzanne, because I think, we have to keep in mind we're living in the age of bureaucratic UFOs right now, congressional hearings, very nuts and bolts military perception. And we're all waiting for when will it be the experiencers turns, and I think we're slowly getting there with things like, Archives of the Impossible, with things like the Soul Foundation, bringing academics into this, but then, every now and again, getting those more humanistic stories there. And I think it is very important that we're not wasting time and energy on proving these things are real through, again, analysis of military videos and stuff. We're just accepting these phenomenon exist. They're having a very profound impact on human beings in many different ways. Let's just kind of go, that will be the baseline from here on out. It's no longer if UFOs are real or not. But what are they? Where do they come from? What are their intentions? And what are our intentions when it comes to this, possibly making contact or a communion, as Whitley Strieber would say. So yeah, I think that's really, really, really cool. If you guys don't mind, I'd love to kind of move towards the first kind of, talks and whatnot. James kind of introduced it and did a wonderful job. He's so charismatic. He's so awesome. And we started with, was it Kurt McConnell who started this thing out?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk about the military. It doesn't get much more than that. Former Senate Intelligence and Armed Service staff and whatnot. So whoever wants to take that, what do you guys think of him kind of opening this thing up?
Sure. I can take a stab at it. So yeah, Kirk, I think he told me, I talked to him later because I'd met him once before at a similar event. And yeah, he told me he also found out last minute, and he was kind of, or he didn't find out last minute. He was trying to get his, the exact information that he was going to put out together with James, and everything was kind of scrambled last minute. And he was stressing that it wasn't going to come off in a fluid way. But I told him it actually, it was worth hearing. What he said was important and fit with the context of the whole panel. So, yeah, I mean, he kind of laid out I forgot if he did this initially or later on he had answered a question where he did this too. But generally, he explained what's been going on in Congress, having been out of it for a while. He made that clear that he doesn't have any, or he's not providing any inside information on the current state of affairs, just based on his experience and presence there. And he kind of laid out a vision of, initially he talked about, I think it was whistleblower protections and the kind of some misinformation that's out there, or misunderstandings that's out there regarding NDAs and what that would take to get someone who was potentially adjacent to or in one of these in the program or in a legacy program to come forward, and whether or not they would be, what sort of legal risks they would be putting themselves in by speaking to Congress in certain ways, whether it's in a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized information facility, if the information is classified and has certain compartments, how that's done, and essentially laid out a path for them to be able to do that without fear legally for repercussions. Now, he did acknowledge there are other things that happen, like threats and intimidation, which they could still face. But in terms of the legal side of it, he said there is a way to do that. That can still be strengthened and reinforced with legislation, with new legislation, but there is a path currently. So he wanted to make sure that any current or future whistleblower was aware of that. So that was really important. And then later on, I think he just kind of, I think this was in response to a question. He explained kind of his idea of what's going on politically in Congress right now around this issue. And I ran into him as he was leaving, and I thanked him for this, because he called out although this is a nonpartisan and bipartisan issue on its face, there is this stigma that's reinforced generally by more liberal people in Congress and generally. And I hold those same positions. Like I consider myself left aligned on a lot of issues, but I've learned to kind of take a step back and look at the situation more broadly when it comes to specific issues. And in this one, like, I've seen it among my peers and who hold similar views as me politically, that they treat it as like your typical conspiracy theory, that it's just it's something that doesn't have the backing of the institutions that they tend to align with as kind of the bearers of the torch of what's authentic, what's real, what's true, and the way we do science, and whether it's academia or science. And they're kind of waiting for those institutions to step up and say, this is real. There is likely a non-human or beyond human component to this, and it should be taken seriously. They've been waiting for that, and because that hasn't come forward in a more centralized way, there is a disproportionate balance or lack of balance in Congress around this, where you have several Democrats who may be interested in the issue or may not be, but they have not taken a public stance on this yet. And he called that out, and I thanked him afterwards. And he was like, look, I lean left as well, but I needed to say it. And I said, I agree with you. Like, I always say it internally to my friends as well. So that was important.
Yeah. I think so, man. You know, I'm very vocal about my politics. It's got me into trouble sometimes, but you know, it is what it is. But I do agree that the more left-leaning, the liberals, the Democrats, if you will, have been very hesitant with this topic, and I do think it needs to be acknowledged, and that needs to change. If there's any topic that could bring us together politically, it is this one. So again, I'm glad they are reinforcing that, reiterating that. And yeah, I thought it was a good way to kind of start this thing off with, in terms of whistleblowers, because that is essentially what we would be hearing throughout this press conference, are whistleblowers from another country, which is also very important. This is not just a United States issue. This is not just crash retrievals and UFOs and possible reverse engineering programs in the United States. Like, there are things going on in other countries as well. Does the United States get involved? Yes, usually, always, but we'll get there. But yeah, I would have to agree with you on many of those fronts. Do you guys want to add anything before we move to the next section of the press conference?
Not at the moment. I mean, Mitch
Okay.
really was, I think of everyone, all the
Kirk.
people who spoke, he was the
Kirk.
one that had, what was that, Anthony?
Is that Kirk? We keep calling him Mitch McConnell.
Oh my God.
Kirk.
Did I say Mitch McConnell?
No,
Oh,
no.
I do.
Inside joke.
Big difference.
Yes. The fact that they both have glasses and white hair doesn't really help me, but
No.
visual person. But Kirk McConnell, thank you. He was the one who really said the least, right? So I feel like we've covered that. He said some really essential things that have to do with just what Anthony said. I'm not going to repeat it. That would take too long. But yeah. So no, we can move on to the next person. He was the one that had the least to say, but what he did say was very important. Yeah.
It was. Absolutely. Um, okay, so here's kind of the not contention with this thing, but there was kind of a problem when it came to many of the witnesses involved in the 1996 Farhenia UFO event. Many of them were supposed to come to Washington to testify
Mm.
at this thing, and their visas were denied. For many different reasons. There are videos going around of James explaining that. I might even put one into this in retrospect eventually. But because of that, what we got, I thought was maybe it would have been much more powerful if they were actually there. But I thought they did a really good job of highlighting these individuals as well. So what they did is they showed us videos of these people in Brazil giving their testimony. It was in, it was translated for those of us in the English speaking community as well, which I really appreciated. And it came across very, very powerful. So, what did you guys make of the entire video presentation of this thing? Suzanne, I feel like I've been hijacking so much. So
You're
we'll
doing
start
great.
with you this time. We'll start with you. What
Sure.
did you make of all the video testimonies? Jacques Vallée was in there too.
I
That was
know,
crazy.
I know. I loved Jacques' presentation because I think it's easy, and this might also speak to the right left perspective on this topic, but it's really easy to get caught up in the technical minutia of these things and this entity, whatever this is, this phenomenon, and it appears that some on the left have done exactly that, right? So we're waiting on science, we're waiting on scientific rigor, we have legal standards, and while those things are extremely important, and will ultimately be definers, whether we like it or not. And citizen science might do it. It may not come from a government, but science will have its day in there. I also think that it's really important to watch the softer, powerful witnesses being treated almost in a legal arena. So, they took a little oath. I don't know who, the lawyer in me wants to know who was on the other side of the camera receiving an oath, because an oath has to be received by someone appropriately monikered to do that. But they set it up like a legal proceeding so that that can be treated like sworn testimony, which has ramifications. So I very much like that. Set it up, treat it like business, treat it like a legal proceeding, sort of. It doesn't have to be, we're not going to have evidentiary objections and those kinds of things. But I thought their ability to get their message out powerfully and instantly shot whatever it was that caused all the visa issues in the foot, and we could set it aside. They got their message out anyway. And I highly suspect that was James just saying, this train will not stop for this foolishness.
I love that. I love that. Sinead, Anthony, like when they started playing these videos, what were the highlights for you guys? I guess we'll go kind of the greatest hits of like who these people were, what you took from that. Whoever wants to take that.
Sure, I'll take
Go
it.
ahead.
The
Cool.
three people that James, I mean, there were 6 people who had their visas denied. So those 6 people were the ones on the video. One of them was one of the army officers who transported the being, and he saw the being. He testified to this. His identity is shielded, so there was a voice. What do you call it? A voice kind of disguiser, and his
Yeah.
face was blocked out. But he swore, that he had transported this being. That was definitely a highlight. James has said behind the scenes that this person may eventually reveal their identity, and then that could help to track even more the journey of this being and what might have ended up happening to it, because we know that it ended up going to the United States, but we don't know anything beyond that. What happened to this poor thing? So, I say poor thing because a lot of people in the audience, and a lot of other people, and myself, definitely Anthony too, we feel for these beings. They crashed, they were lost in a strange place on another planet for at least a week. They were separated from each other. They were asking for help. These witnesses in the videos said that. So the 3 girls who saw the being cowering against the wall on the lot, they felt for it. They felt for this creature. They were overwhelmed by the incredibly weird optics, of the creature, that this is a thing they'd never seen before. They couldn't understand what they were seeing. They couldn't compute at first what they were seeing, right? So immediately it was this natural kind of base instinct of fear and to run away. But each one of them felt this being calling out for help and asking them to help it. It was scared. It was afraid. It was vulnerable. So one of the three girls there were two sisters and there was an older friend. Her name was Katya, and she spoke, and her testimony really stood out to me because she said something I've not heard her say before, which was that she feels the being is always with her. Like in the current day, she says she feels every single day that this being is with her. And that echoes something that Carlos, the man who actually went to the crash site, saw the craft crash, was there, was told to leave by the army. He spoke of that as well. He says every single day he remembers that experience. He's back there on the crash site every day. He thinks of that. So, there was a great deal of information in the testimonies in person and on video, but also emotion. Like this is really hitting human beings on a very human level, and the compassion involved that the people that encountered this being felt towards the being. Even a couple of them said, what happened to it? Was it all right? Like, we never found out what happened to it. They were concerned about it. They were hoping that it was okay. So this speaks to a level of humanity that to me is very deep, where we're thinking not just about ourselves, but we're also thinking about other creatures, other beings who we share that kind of emotional connection with, vulnerability, right? Wanting to be taken care of, wanting to be safe, wanting to go home, right? They felt that in this being. So I think this is a topic where, and this again came across in the testimony, these people are calling on us to think bigger. They're asking us to be aware, not just that this stuff is happening here on Earth, but that there are beings out there beyond our planet that are part of our reality, and they're coming and interacting with us. And we really need to be more aware of that, because it's affecting us on so many different levels, but on a very human level. We need to know that what we think reality is, what we think life is, what we think the world is not, it's so much bigger. We're part of a galaxy. We're part of a cosmos, not just a planet. So that came across. And there was a farmer who testified. He said that he and another farmer had seen the craft coming out of the sky. They had felt concerned about the occupants. Everyone who saw this occur was concerned in some way or another. They were not like, get these things out of here, they're evil and horrible. It was more of, what's happening? Can we help them? Are they going to be all right? And then trying to digest the experience later on. So I think the humanity, the human level of it really, really came across to me, even though the testimonies were very official. They were done in an official building. There were statements that they were reading from that they had created themselves, by the way, but they were still statements they were reading from. There was that feeling of formality, but the heart and soul that came from these people was something else. Also, the mother of the two girls, she really, really stood out to me as well, because she did not take an entire briefcase stuffed full of money that was offered to her by essentially men in black. They said, we'll make you wealthy for the rest of your life if you just be quiet, and if you take your daughters, go on public media, on mainstream media, on camera, and say that they lied, or say that they saw a dog or a homeless person or something else instead. And she said, I won't do that. I will not betray my daughters. They told me the truth. I know they told me the truth. She didn't see the being herself, but she's loyal to her children. She believed them, and she could tell from their reaction that they were not making this up. So, the integrity of these people, their humanity, that really came across, as well as all of the details, So it was really impactful. Even though they weren't there in person, it was really impactful.
Yeah,
I would have to second everything Sinead just said, because that to me was the biggest thing. Like, I came into this because we get so used to the usual like rigidity and formality of these types of events in the DC area, especially, that we're usually talking about the nuts and bolts side of this phenomenon at these sorts of events. But it very quickly became clear during the video testimony portion of this, before the in-person Brazilian witnesses started speaking, that this was an experiential, phenomenological event happening, where people were opening up about things that us as experiencers have dealt with and deal with on an emotional level with these experiences and interactions that generally is not discussed in such a formal and credible and public facing way. So that is when I started realizing the significance of this was during that, like when the girls, now women, were talking about what they felt and what they still feel after this. In some cases, how their thoughts and opinions of their thoughts and feelings of what was happening changed in real time after initially being terrified of the thing, and kind of having like this thing go through their minds, whether this was like a demon or something because of the religious connotations there in that part of the world, to very quickly changing. And yeah, the mother standing up because she did not want, like, despite the stigma around this, like she wanted to stand up for her daughters because even though she didn't see it herself, she saw a footprint. She knew who her daughters were, and it was almost like she had her own ontological shift or shock in that moment that changed her, and she stood up for her children as witnesses and experiencers. Even the people who came and handed her a suitcase full of money, like there were some weird peculiarities that came out in her testimony that kind of get you thinking on some of the things that, you know, John Keel would talk about in the Mothman prophecies about the men in black. Like she said, like they spoke, I think she said they spoke Portuguese, but she couldn't pinpoint the accent. She said she didn't recognize the currency of the bills. That I thought that was interesting too. Like if it were dollars, I'm pretty sure she would have recognized that. So I don't know what that was about. There's definitely some weird things happening there. And I don't know if she said this in the testimony or in the film, the new version, but she said she like ran out right after they left and the car had like disappeared. Like it wasn't there. Assuming like it should have still been there by the time she got out there. So things like that I think were also interesting. But yeah, and then Jacques Vallée's testimony, like Suzanne said, I think that should, like, I still want to go back and listen to it closely because I haven't yet, but he was dropping some very, you know, strong statements that were not really, he didn't really use much conditional tense in those statements. He was stating them very matter-of-factly about cases that involved other beings and like programs having beings. Yeah, that resembled these. Yeah. So
Valley Soul. Yeah,
fascinating.
I also loved that he also went back to almost the non-scientific things of meaning. These are beings who, just like us, breathe air. They have fear. He was describing things that humans ought to be empathetic with and relate to, and we don't always. But I loved that part of his talk, making it really quite human for a non-human entity.
Yeah. And he did use, I noticed this as well. He used the term extraterrestrial, which if you follow Jacques' work, like he kind of started there and then he went more into like interdimensional stuff. But more recently, like as he's discussing his approach to this in recent years, I feel like he's taken more of a ultra terrestrial approach to this topic that you know, it could actually contain elements of all of the above, whether it's extraterrestrial, crypto-terrestrial, interdimensional, you know.
Yeah.
Choose D. Always choose D in multiple choice, guys. I agree, Anthony. You guys bring up so many good points. I won't you know, spend too much more time on this. The one other person I did want to highlight, because this was interesting to me from the human side and kind of the unintentional ramifications of this event, was the sister of Marco Teresi. His sister was the one who, you know, brought forward the information that he was a soldier that actually came into physical contact with the being, and was, I mean, I hate to say it, lost his life, possibly because of the biological effects of this being on him, which is really sad. So, I mean, you even had like the pathologists kind of talk about this as well, of what happened to him. So that really hit me too, like the ripple effect. Anthony, you brought up that like it's not just the person having the experience who is affected, it is their family, it is their friends, it is the community. It stretches further and further and has this ripple effect. So like, dude, your brother died from possibly coming into contact with an alien. Wow, that is profound and deeply sad. It's
I would
sad.
throw this in, Ryan. To me, it hit me like it does with me with families who have lost a family member to an unsolved murder. And they have to live decades and decades and decades in the dark and with 1 million questions that may never be answered. And that struck me about these people as well, that they're living in that dark with those questions, and odds of getting serious answers are so slim.
Yeah. And the added component of this, which came out in one of the interviews we conducted with our friend Dr. Marina Wheeler from the Division of Perceptual Studies at University of Virginia, who she studies parapsychological phenomena like out-of-body experiences. But she is Brazilian herself. She grew up in Brazil and went to university around that area. So she was telling us, and she even spoke with some of the witnesses after the event, and we were there as she was interpreting for us. And we sat down with her afterwards and spoke to her. And she told us like how they were saying how, and she remembers this, like that this event was all over the news, like nationwide, the Virginia incident in 96 when it happened. But she said that she was like almost immediately ingrained in her and others in society that this was a hoax. It was a fraud. It was a joke, like it was turned into a joke, kind of a laughing stock. And the witnesses, when we spoke with them, with Marina, like they reinforced that. I think it was Carlos who said like he'd lost his career, he'd lost his, I think he said, did he lose his wife? I don't remember, but he lost his career, he lost friends.
Yeah.
Dr. Venturelli told us how, people would like make jokes about it and kind of like trash his reputation over it. And he was there with his wife, and she, reinforced that as well. And Marina just said, yeah, it was profound to see that these people have gone through all that on top. So like the woman we were talking about and her brother who passed, in addition to the unsolved murder component of this, like there's this huge stigma side of this that kind of forces you to probably keep all this bottled in ways that you couldn't otherwise with more prosaic incidents. So yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah, and it brings to me, it brings even more weight to Dr. Italo Venturelli's testimony, because he, first of all, and this is a common story that many of us in ufology have heard before, he had a massive, serious heart attack last year and almost died, and it made him realize, I can't take this to the grave. I have to tell the truth about this while I'm still alive. And this is also why James was so thrilled that he decided to come forward, because not only is he willing to come forward and say, yes, this happened after all this time, after 30 years, but he's still a neurologist. And no, sorry, not a neurologist. Anthony, help me. What's the right word?
Neurosurgeon.
Thank you. He's a brain surgeon at the hospital, and he's still doing that. He's still consulting. He's still working in an official capacity. He's held in very high regard in Brazil. So it's kind of like, imagine a major hospital in your city, and the most famous doctor at that hospital coming forth and saying that 30 years ago he met an alien. It's really pretty far out. And so for him to do that, and to do it with so much the integrity of the witnesses was just undeniable. You could just feel it in the room. Everyone was talking about this, the fact that they were just telling the truth. It was so incredibly apparent. And so for Dr. Italo, he spoke about having that moment of realizing, I cannot take this to my deathbed. I have to speak up about this. It's too important not to, no matter what the risk is, no matter what the ridicule, no matter if my career is over, I don't care. I have to do this, right? And how he was also, this has to be said, he is the only person so far to testify in an official capacity about having direct firsthand contact and communication with an extraterrestrial. And the way he spoke about it wasn't, it's not like he was speaking in a way that you might expect, I suppose. There was this weird looking thing. I didn't know what to make of it. I felt scared. what he was saying, what the way he described the experience, it was immediately coming from the heart, what he felt. And it was immediately apparent to him that that being in the bed that he saw was also coming from the heart, because of this aura that just emanated from it, of peace, of compassion, of love. He's very moved by that. You can see him sobbing in James's film. He got emotional when he gave his testimony. When Carlos gave his testimony, he was very emotional, and Dr. Italo was wiping his eyes as Carlos spoke. I mean, this is very real to these people, even after all these decades. It has affected them in their lives pervasively, and it's something that they've never forgotten. They carry it with them every single day. So Dr. Italo was even talking about the ways some very interesting ways. He's a brilliant man. He was talking about how he designed a chessboard and used the chessboard and the chess pieces to work out his own internal process of how he was feeling about his reality having shifted so drastically, this contact with this being that he couldn't understand, yet felt this emotional heart connection with this creature. He couldn't really make sense of it, right? It's not something you can intellectually process. So over the years, he did so many different things to try to understand his own experience. Like, it's something that has stayed with them all. I mean, it's really, you felt that in the room when they were testifying. It wasn't just them talking about something that happened 30 years ago. It felt like they were describing their current feelings, their current experience of the phenomenon.
I think that's such a good point, Sinead. And we need to remember that, because the fear narrative that gets rolled out constantly as I think, as a means of managing people's looking or investigating into the subject and substance, keeps humans, if you keep them scared, they will step back or, walk away. But it was not a fear-based experience that he had. And no one describes that from these beings. And I think it's really important that these little details, to me, they're big details, but these smaller details not get lost, because that's how you deal with the fear narrative.
Yeah. I think nuance puts people, the more we understand, the less we fear. So
Right.
I would have to agree with you for sure.
Yeah. And I just want to add,
fear
to everything Sinead just said, that in Dr. Venturelli's testimony, he also, like Sinead was saying, he put you there in real time, in a way, emotionally. And he really got me to see, like, I didn't have much of any doubt in his testimony from the films, but this, I mean, for anyone who may have, this definitely, like, would change it for you if you were there listening to this, because he walked you through, like, what he normally would do when he enters a room and his advice is asked for to look at a patient. And he said, it's like, if they're not speaking or something, like, he's like, I'm looking at them to try to feel what they're feeling, what they could be thinking about, what's wrong with them, any, like, nonverbal cues that's coming off their body language. And he talked about in precise details how he was doing that with this being, to the point where, like, he saw it, like, it was looking out the window, I think. And then when he walked in the room, it kind of slowly turned and, like, locked eyes with him. And he said, like, I knew right then and there that this thing was sentient, like that it was intelligent, it was sentient. And just the way it was taking in its surroundings, almost like it was learning in real time. And he said that despite it being wounded and it kind of being surrounded by all these doctors and all that, like, and being sort of like a victim in this case, it still had the room, like, it had control of the room. Everyone was seemingly transfixed or connected in a way with this thing, not in a negative way. Again, not in a negative way.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say control. I would say it had, like, full. It was kind of holding its place securely in this strange environment, right? I mean, it wasn't panicking. It wasn't thrashing or trying to harm.
Right. When fighting. Right.
Yeah. And Dr. Italo even said that he had the distinct feeling that the being knew that they were there to help it and that they were doing their best to help it. Yeah. The testimonies were amazing. I mean, Carlos's testimony, which is very apparent in James's film, hearing it firsthand is on another level. I mean, it was just, he talked about how it affected his life. He lost his career, and he's been a geography teacher ever since. He used to be a businessman. He had his own business, lost friends, had to move away from the area, was ridiculed thoroughly, was socially ostracized, was not welcomed into social spaces in his local town or village. Like he said, he would go into a restaurant or a pub or a bar, and people would laugh at him and he'd have to leave because they were bullying him, really, right? They were really making it clear that they thought he was fake, that his story was fake. But I mean, how are they benefiting from this? James made a point of saying nobody here, none of the witnesses was trying to sell a book. They're not trying to get money. They're not trying to start a career. They're not trying to be famous. They've never asked for money. They've never asked for any profit or benefit. They just want the truth to be out. That's really all they want. So on that note, I asked Carlos, and we asked Dr. Italo as well. There have been rumblings about the first Brazilian congressional hearing in 2026 that was supposed to happen for UFOs in Brazil. And they both said they really doubt that that's going to occur. So even though there was a senator there from Brazil who spoke, and he spoke on the importance of the topic, their attitude about him was a little bit more cynical. Anthony, do you want to say, because I heard this from you, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I don't remember if it was probably Carlos who said this through Marina, who was interpreting for us afterwards.
Yeah.
He just said he thought that senator was just there for optics, that he thought he could kind of get something out of this issue, just based off of Carlos's reading of his statements and kind of reading between the lines of what he said there at the event. So I don't know what to make of that. I'm not well versed in Brazilian politics.
But I mean, overall, like their point was really that they don't feel they're getting the support in Brazil socially, culturally, or officially, or governmentally, or medically, or anything, politically. They're just not getting the support. And it's crazy because Marina, we were talking with Marina about this. As Anthony mentioned, she grew up in Brazil, and in Brazil, there's a very, very long history of mediumship, of various forms of engaging with phenomena, and this is commonly spoken about in Brazil. It's not an uncomfortable topic. But UAP and extraterrestrials, oh no, you don't talk about that in Brazil, right? So you can, if you're a medium, good for you, you'll be fine, nobody's going to bother you. But if you've seen an alien, look out, right? So Marina was commenting on what it felt like for her as a Brazilian to sit in an American official capacity and witness her country people being able to speak about this, and being surrounded by people who clearly believed them, supported them. I mean, people stood up and gave them standing ovations after their testimony. It was a very supportive environment, really, really supportive. Yeah.
I gave a standing ovation from my desk here in Japan, and it was like 3 a.m, I think, or something like that.
It was crazy early for you.
But you know what? I also, before I forget, I want to give a shout out to Android Paranormal and Hides in Longgrass, 2 of our regulars here. They both were at the event as well, so I did want to shout them out. And they were sending us, photos and stuff as the event was going on. So thank you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you for those as well.
I'd like to give a shout out to someone else
please,
who popped
please
up
do.
there.
Please.
He popped up, a friend of mine, Derek, who actually is with me at Citizens for Disclosure, and he helps run the Alabama chapter. So what's up?
There he is. Love it. Love it.
Clicking at the same time.
I want to add one thing that just to piggyback off of what Sinead mentioned about the spiritist and more spiritual movements in Brazil and traditions. This was one of the perks of sitting next to our friend Marina during the event. She was kind of, at points, she was complaining about the interpretation that was happening, that the interpreter was missing certain things.
I heard that,
when Carlos would go off script. She was just reading off her English translated script. But besides that, this was fascinating, and I forgot to mention this in the episode that Sinead and I just put out about the event. But when I believe it was the Brazilian senator, when he was up talking, he talked about this guy named Chico Xavier. I could be mispronouncing that. And he called him, in his testimony, he talks about him and says something like he was a famous humanist, I think is the term he used.
Pacifist.
So he said a pacifist and a humanist. Yeah, those are the 2 words he used to describe him. And then like Marina, who was sitting next to me, like shoved me as he said that. Like she was like, and I turned around, I was like, what? And she was like, oh my God, Chico Xavier. Like I wrote a paper about him. He's the most famous Brazilian medium ever. Like this guy's a medium. And I had no idea. So just to second what Sinead was mentioning there, that you had this Brazilian senator up there talking about a medium at this event, even though he didn't use the term medium. That's what this guy is known for in Brazil. So yeah, as Marina told us, like they're actually very open to the parapsychological phenomena in Brazil, but not the UFO topic. And we kind of made a joke about how it's sadly flipped here.
Yeah.
Right.
Currently, at least.
Currently, good point,
Yeah.
Anthony. And I think bringing those together
Yeah.
is where the true answers
Yeah.
lay. And I know that's what you guys are doing. That's what we're trying to do here at Somewhere in the Skies as well. All very, very good points, guys. Okay. I want to kind of bookend this as well. Because I told you guys we go an hour. Of course, that never happens. But I will start to try to wrap this up, I guess. Even though I could talk to you guys for 3 hours. Follow the paper trail. That is a sort of thing that has been going around Twitter right now. And that is because James introduced us to another individual at the event to bring us back, I guess, United States oriented. And that was a gentleman named Clausen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I will be
United States.
finishing my FOIA request this week.
Oh,
no way.
I
Nice.
love it. I love it,
That's
Suzanne. The next John Greenwald over here.
Here we go.
It's perfect. That's why she's on the show, guys. That's why she's on the show. Let's talk about him, because this really caught my attention.
This was big.
There had been rumors, not just rumors. There had been many testimony by those involved in Brazil that the United States was involved in this retrieval. And now it looks like the evidence is pointing even further towards that testimony. So what did you guys make of Clausen's testimony and where that's headed when it comes to the Varginha case? Whoever wants to take that.
I can start it off. So that was, to me, that was really important, because it kind of reminded me of this this post that went viral, I think it was last year, by Greg Scuduto on X, talking about how disclosure will come from, I think he said, like from the auditors or something like that, looking at the money trail basically in these programs, because it's that kind of work that I think is oftentimes glossed over. But what Colonel Clausen did was say, all right, like, let's, under the assumption that this actually happened, that the US sent planes, I think it was 1 or 2 Air Force planes to this Brazilian base, 2 planes, thanks. Where in the film Moment of Contact, New Revelations, James talks to I think an air traffic controller who worked at the base or the airport where this was seen, and he confirmed that they were seen there, but there was no documentation he had yet about it. So if that's the case, that these were in fact dispatched or deployed from the US, Colonel Clausen laid out exactly how that approval process would take place, which other Air Force base would have had to been notified and contacted to get the approval. And he was like, all right, so that's one paper trail you can look for confirmation that this happened. Another would be like, he said, for the type of plane that was seen there, for that plane to make it all the way to Brazil from the Air Force base in the US where these planes get deployed from, that it would have had to stop for refueling on the way. So he was like, that's another paper trail we can look for. And he's like, we know its exact, mileage they can hold in its fuel tanks. So that was one paper trail. The other one was who would pay for the refueling, where they would get that approval and who would pay for it. Once they got to the base in Brazil or the airport, then they would have to get refueled. So someone would have to pay for that and get an approval. And so that's one other paper trail. Then flying back, there was another one. Even the approval for them to enter Brazilian airspace, that would be another one I think he mentioned. So he laid out exactly and specifically like all the steps along the way of a mission like this to take place, how you could find evidence of this actually happening. And I think that was really important. And we had Representative Burleson was in the room. this was clearly meant to direct other investigators, perhaps in a congressional capacity, perhaps independent people like Suzanne who want to file FOIA requests on where to look. So that was huge.
Absolutely. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, this was not said by Colonel Clausen during his testimony, but I know this just from talking to James behind the scenes, that this is another example of someone, because he's a retired colonel who's now in his 80s, has been retired for at least 15 years, but could not go to his deathbed without saying, hang on a second, this is not right. So he knows that there are a lot of other people that were working alongside him at the same time that he was fully active in his career, who also noticed this and were kind of like, hang on a second, why? First of all, it's the usual kind of story of all the people who are working in government or in military, who are serving the American people, but are seeing things that don't add up and are not allowed to say anything about it. Otherwise, something's going to happen to them. So, he seems to be someone who is trying to encourage maybe other members of the military who are retired, who might also have similar stories, to come forth and, really take up the reins on this, because it's one thing to share our stories and to share experiences, but there seems to be a general sense that the time is now to really get real about this and start doing things like finding actual documentation, unlocking access to things that have been previously classified. And Kirk McConnell, I did not say Mitch, Kirk McConnell, specifying that, NDAs are not exactly what we think they are. He actually specifically said that no one has ever been prosecuted in the American legal system by violating an NDA that led with information that was crucial to the wellness, essentially, of the American populace. No one was ever taken to town for that. They
Provided
were
to Congress.
reported.
So, as what he said, provided to Congress.
Provided confidentially in a SCIF. If they follow the proper procedures, then they have been safe so far. But did anybody else want to focus on the U.S. ambassador to that area of Brazil? Clausen called him out by name.
Yes.
Boom.
By title. He had to have known everything. Nothing would have happened without him knowing.
Names.
With things like that, and David Grush has been naming names and getting real, online publicly. It just seems like more people are willing to take a little bit more of a step forward, closer to the edge of what risk is in this circumstance, to just push this forward. Because if we keep just talking the way that we have previously, we're going to stay on the same hamster wheel and nothing is actually going to move forward, right? So there is a feeling of urgency, and that also came with the fact that James put this event together to begin with, right? He wanted to make sure that even though this is not a congressional hearing or another form of official setting, in terms of government, it was still important to recognize the validity of this story and these witnesses in the United States in a way that felt formal, that felt respectful, that felt very important, that felt, that would get enough coverage so that the effects would ripple out, right? And so kudos to James for doing it. He said basically it took moving mountains and walking on water to make it happen. And he had Aline, the woman who also served as the translator. She's the producer in his new film. The translation was the only thing that maybe could have been a little better. Nothing against Aline. She's an absolutely lovely person, and I know that she did her best for sure. But I feel like there could have been maybe an actual, full-time translator up there, because there were details that were missed and the descriptions that were missed. That's the only thing that I would say was a bit of a downside. But, the atmosphere, the urgency, the formality, and the seriousness came across, as well as the emotion, really potently. So I felt like people were galvanized after that, which happens every single time we all get together.
That's right.
Yeah, like everyone just feels fired up and ready to make change happen. So we need to keep doing this, coming together more as much.
And I would add, like, the importance of all of these seemingly, it's a slow process, but all of these seemingly disparate pieces of information that we're getting from investigative reporters and journalists and experiencers and whistleblowers and testimonies and Congress and all that. Like, there's a puzzle that's kind of, the pieces are slowly falling into place. We mentioned earlier that, I think we called this a crash, but Carlos D'Souza described seeing a gash in the back of the object when it was crashing. So,
Yeah.
Who's to say this wasn't taken down? And we just saw this article that came out in the Liberation Times by Chris Sharp that reiterated the probable involvement based on his sources of Clapper and I forgot the other woman's name, but two U.S. officials with ODNI, the Office of the Directorate of National Intelligence, who seemingly led these legacy programs, or this legacy program that was being referred to, and that the source told him that they had technology to be able to detect UAP when they were still cloaked, before they even appeared. So as they're kind of manifesting, if you want to use that term. So if we had prior knowledge through that program that this object was going to be there, could we have potentially taken it down, we being the US program behind this? So that's another piece of this that I think is slowly falling into place and could also help, it could rattle people in these programs if they have been hiding things, if they want to come out and whistleblow, and if not, then if they've been hiding things, it could get them to maybe make a wrong move that could help investigators out. So,
yeah. Anthony, that's a good point because, many people theorize too that Roswell was also a shoot down. And, the skeptics always say, if these, aliens or whatever are so far advanced, why are they crashing so much on Earth? And who's to say that they're crashing because they ran out of fuel or something went wrong? Like maybe these are shoot downs. So we do have to keep that in mind. So I'm glad you brought that up as well. Wow. Okay. So many more avenues we could take, guys, but I think we'll start wrapping it up here. There was a Q&A as well after. I don't know if any of those questions really stood out to you guys that were asked of the audience. Whitley Strieber, of all people, got a question in, which I told Suzanne, I think in the chat, I'm like, 2026, we're having a National Press Club event about a UFO crash in Brazil. And the first question asked is Whitley Strieber. Like,
Right.
I did not have that on my bingo card.
And remember, he stood up at
millennials
Seoul
would
this
say.
year, and he asked a pointed
Yeah.
question at Seoul as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Did
Someone
anything
else asked
very-
the question. Someone else asked the question too. She's right here.
Oh, Sinead, you
Yeah.
asked a question as well. I don't know if we
asked a
got that in
critical
the Okay. Well, yeah, walk us through that, the Q&A and your experience of that.
Well, I mean, it's kind of obvious at this point, but my biggest interest in all of this is how it's affecting human beings and how it affects us on a very, very, again, on the very human level, right? Because I'm very interested in our evolution. We really need to level up as human beings. We need to be doing better, for ourselves, for each other, for the planet, for animals, for in so many different ways. We need to be doing better. So my personal philosophy is, this is just me, I think that all of this phenomena serves in part to wake us up to a bigger reality and to help us level up, right? To help us realize that we're maybe not as important as we think we are. We maybe are not as smart as we think we are. There's a whole lot more going on in the galaxy than we realize. And so I came from that human perspective, and, I wanted to ask them, how has this affected you, like the witnesses? How has it changed or affected who you are as a human being, never mind as a doctor, as a witness, as a person who does autopsies or a person who teaches geography? Forget that. Like, what about you as just the pure human being that you are? How has this remained in your life? How has it affected who you are, made you think differently about the world, about life, about yourself, about the soul, about anything? I didn't make my question that long, but that's basically what I was thinking. And the answers were amazing, like really amazing. You can hear them, in the live stream, how they responded. But
you can't hear them very well in the live stream. But I cleaned it up, and it's in our episode covering the event on Fire in the Cosmos. We have Sinead's question cleaned up a bit, and you can hear it well. The responses there.
Oh, perfect.
Cool.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it was it's so clear that that's where they're at too. Like the storytelling of the details and what occurred and how it happened. That's just a small part of what their reality is. Like the people who were there, who experienced it. Like they're not thinking about, on January 20th, 1996, they're thinking about the emotional experience they had. They're thinking about they're concerned about this being. What happened to it? You know, why was it taken away? Like it's led them to really think about things in a much bigger way. And so without going into their answers, I really encourage people to listen to their answers, because I would not be able to do them justice.
Yeah.
That was an important question for me to ask, and a lot of people appreciated it. I got great feedback on that, because so many other people feel the same way. You know, like, we're all here trying to human. We're trying to do our best to be good people, to make a contribution to the world, to do the right thing, to do what we know comes from the heart, and to not everyone's sick of all the crap. You know, people are just sick of it. They're sick of the way we've been operating for all this time, hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's really time for something to change. So I love that it wasn't just that I got to ask the question, but also the response from people in the crowd who came up to me and said, thank you for asking that question. I was also wondering that. It's just so clear that our community comes from this place of making meaning, not just knowing facts and details and getting angry about, you know, conspiracies and cover-ups. It's about making meaning, you know, like what has value in life and why does it have value? So yeah, I won't go further into that, but yeah, that's what I was thinking and feeling and experiencing around the time I asked that question. Yeah.
Yeah, we are meaning makers. And I think, you know, we're trying to find that meaning when it comes to these things we don't understand. What a good question to ask, Sinead. I'm happy you did that as well.
And I just want to add one last thing.
Please.
Sinead's question and the way it was asked and who was asked by, I think reinforces the need that I want to get across to our audience, that as experiencers, like we always talk about, you know, what's missing in this field, and it's not going to happen on its own. Like we got to put ourselves in these rooms. We got to put ourselves in front of these people. We got to bring in other members from seemingly other communities, whether it's like our friend Marina from a prominent university, who happened to have a connection to this case, like, but does not actually study UFOs or talk about them at all. Like, it's still taboo in her department. Those kind of interactions and relationships and networking and community building, anyone here can do that. So we are just 2 people here, or 4 people, and we're doing it in our own small ways. But imagine if everyone in the community was doing this in their lives and with their neighbors and their friends and their families. Like, this is how you break the stigma, and this is how you get this stuff out and normalize it.
Yeah.
Amen.
And Congressman Congressman Burleson. I'm not American, so I can't remember. That's my excuse. But he spoke to that. Like, he said, you know, it's the American people that the government is there for. It's not the other way around, right? The government works for you, Americans. So he's saying, put pressure on them, show up, speak out, you know, come out physically to events as much as you can, write to your representatives, do all of that. And I love that he spoke to that. I love that he reminded everyone in the audience that it's the population that really has the power. You know, we cannot forget that. No matter what country we're in, the government works for us, not the other way around. And if we can come together on that level, put aside our polarizations and our differences, powerful things can happen.
Yep. And I'll make a plug for Citizens for Disclosure, which is what I lead the Virginia chapter for that under the New Paradigm Institute. And we're all volunteers. We got like almost 4,000 now around the country, in different states. And I think we have like 40 states with actual volunteer leads, like Derek here in the chat. And we're actually like, we have strategies in place to do just that, ways to get involved, ways to raise awareness on the ground and in the halls of Congress on this issue, to provide the political will that so many people in Congress are waiting on before they feel comfortable and safe enough to speak out about this and not risk losing their next elections. So it starts with us, like, and we need to make it about us. It's not about them, the Congress or the institutions. It's about us. So
experience, you know, ufology would not exist if it wasn't for experiencers.
Thank you. Yes, right? We are the data. We are the data. And I couldn't agree more. Guys, you certainly showed up. You showed up. You did the work. I cannot wait to watch your exclusive interviews. Again, I highly suggest people go over to all your socials. We put a bunch of links in the show notes, but before I let you two go, can you let us know where we can find you guys And what you got coming up over at Fire in the Cosmos?
Sure. You can find us and support our work most directly on Patreon. Just search Fire in the Cosmos. We're on all social media. Thanks, Suzanne, for the link. We're on all social
Sorry,
media.
it's covering
as
your
well.
face.
That's all
I
right.
know.
Yeah, we're on
Sorry,
all
there.
social media. We're on all social media at Fire in the Cosmos, and we're eventually going to start some writing as well on our Patreon, like Substack style writing. We're starting community calls as well with the community, like Q&A type calls, and eventually we'll want to bring on guests as well into those calls for our followers and patrons. So
yeah, and as for what we have coming up, we have our dear friends Annika and Tristan are going to be our next released interview. They did a 7-part series or 6-part series with Jeffrey Mishlove. They are 2 consciousnesses in one body. And although that might sound completely bonkers, it is for real. They're just absolutely amazing. They're distinctly 2 different people sharing one body, and they articulate their experience in a way that we've never heard anyone else do before. So highly recommend that you check that out and get to meet them via us. They're extraordinary, and they'll be around. They'll be leaders in our field as well.
Yep. If you want to do some homework, check out those interviews on New Thinking Aloud by Jeffrey Mishlove. Like, they're well worth it. And
oh my gosh,
yeah,
I have so much homework after this episode. Darn it. I love it. No, I have learned so much tonight. This has been one of my most favorite live streams we've ever done. Guys, I'm so happy that I've met both of you and that we had this conversation. I know it's only the beginning, but I want to thank you both for taking the time to give us the inside scoop. For more, again, guys, go to the links in the show notes for Fire in the Cosmos. But what I'm going to do now is sign off and say goodnight to our chat. I'll talk to both of you in just a moment in the green room. But thank you once again for joining us today on Somewhere in the Skies.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Suzanne,
for having us, Suzanne and Brian. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right. I will see you in just a moment. Thank you. Suzanne, I'll let you go back into the chat. I will say goodnight to the wonderful chat. What an incredible conversation. We
Amazing.
will debrief
They're wonderful.
as well. So thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. And then there was one. I don't want to leave them hanging in the green room, so I'm going to say goodnight to you guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Somewhere in the Live Stream. I hope you found this rewarding. Be sure to check out the entire broadcast of the UAP National Press Club event. You can find it at News Nation, or we do have the broadcast right here on our channel as well. For exclusive interviews with attendees and some of the witnesses and speakers as well, head on over to Fire in the Cosmos. Again, all the links are in the show notes. So thank you. Thank you to all our regulars. Thank you to all of our new people that joined us tonight. So many new names. That's so exciting. I love it. All of our Somewhere in the Skies regulars, go on over to Fire in the Cosmos and let's truly build this community. So once again, thank you for joining us. Your code word is Varhinia. Be sure to put that in your Apple Podcast reviews and your Spotify comments. And we have a brand new episode of the podcast premiering in just a couple hours. It's about UFO crash retrievals. Who would have thunk? How appropriate. I go through, I think, 8 or so UFO crash retrievals that you have possibly never heard of. You can find that on the podcast main feed in just a couple hours. Rate, review, do that wherever you can. We truly appreciate it. Click like on this video, subscribe if you're not already. We appreciate that as well. So from all of us, I'm going to say thank you, good night, and we will talk to you guys hopefully next week. We'll see what's going on, but enjoy your week and keep looking up. I'll leave you with our mantra: keep your feet on the ground, but never stop searching somewhere in the skies. Take care.
nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide at all.